Lessons and learnings, illusions and delusions. Welcome to Star Kittens Media. Today we are talking about the partial lunar eclipse occurring on September 18 at 2:34 p.m. here in New Zealand. For those listening in the United States, it occurs on September 17 at 10:34 p.m. The sun has just moved into Virgo. The moon during this partial lunar eclipse is in Pisces. We highlight the beneficial trine the moon makes with Pallas, Athena, and Scorpio, and we also talk about the opposition between Mercury and Saturn. There's a lot of beautiful information shared. Make sure that you listen to the whole video. If you haven't yet done so, please share our videos with your loved ones. Welcome to this doozy of a reading about the upcoming lunar eclipse. My name is Sana and I am joined by David. Kia ora.
Hello and hi.
We were talking about the beautiful arrangement of the planetary bodies earlier today, and I look forward to what you are sharing with us.
Yeah, anytime there's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, it's always, I guess it gets most astrologers pretty excited, but given how profound these can be for humanity as well, even those that aren't interested in astrology, if you can see these eclipses, a lot of people do, of course, get out and watch them. So with that, firstly, welcome to our new subscribers and listeners and those who are joining us for the first time and those who are returning. We appreciate you and we love doing these readings and bring our insights on 13 sign astrology. Today will be a little bit different insofar as because we are keen to get across that this eclipse will affect every single person on the planet, but in a different way. I'm going to spend a little bit of time later on talking about each of the houses briefly so that you can locate where the eclipse is happening for you in which particular house, which of course presupposes that you are aware of where your Pisces house is in the 13 sign system. If not, let us know and it will get in touch with us and we'll provide you with a chart to help with that. But it's a lunar eclipse, pretty exciting. These are rare, of course, maybe once or twice a year. And I think this may even be the first one this year. But the overall theme is illusions and delusions, lessons and learnings. The universe has a message, and that message is that area or that place in our lives where we are most disconnected from reality, where we are living with self-deception, is what will come up at this lunar eclipse. And the interesting thing about a lunar eclipse is that they last energetically and vibrationally for about 6 months, which means actually that this lunar eclipse or this eclipse sits right in the middle of a 6-month period. So 3 months have actually already gone. And for many of us, and for those who are super intuitive, this eclipse energy started to first show up around about the time of the June 22nd solstice. So almost 3 months ago. And at that time, we did a reading and the full moon was in a T-square with Neptune, which features very strongly at this eclipse. So there's a resonance and a connection with the June solstice and this reading, and of course the end of this 6-month cycle, which will be around about the time of the December solstice on the 22nd of the 12th, 2024. So this 6-month process, we're right in the middle of it. And it's a beautiful time, therefore, to talk about this, because we can both look back at what started to happen energetically, which was very subtle, and be present to what's happening now, and then look forward and project and think about, okay, so there's been some interesting energies going on in my life and around me, and now you can perhaps put your finger on as to why the conclusion I've mentioned of the 6-month lunar eclipse process from June to December is around about the 21st, 22nd of December, when there's a December solstice. And there's also a full moon just a few days before that, which is in the sign of Ophiuchus, which will be a very exciting time as well. But the key thing is to be open to insights, to lessons about where we need to release those flights of fancy, those figments of our imagination, where both individually and collectively we are subject to mass hallucination, and we are being encouraged at this lunar eclipse to release these energies, to release these attachments, to release these holes that we have mentally, energetically, and physically. So the lunar eclipse is going to stir up a part of your chart, a house in your chart, and to help with that, to help with understanding and bedding down that understanding, at the very end, we will talk about each of the houses, as I said briefly, and provide a kind of a theme or a context for each of these, so that you know that if it's in your first house, this lunar eclipse is located in your first house, broadly what that means, and therefore what to look out for, what to tune into, if you like, or if it's in the second house or third or whatever. We'll go through each of the 12 and provide that context at the end.
Wonderful, thank you. So at the time of this full moon / lunar eclipse, the sun has just moved into Virgo. So we're moving into Virgo season. And the full moon is situated just at the beginning of Pisces. So how is this lunar eclipse Piscean energy playing out?
Pisces, what a beautiful sign, as they all are, but this one has some aspects to it that are difficult to kind of put your finger on, because it's a very ephemeral, very mysterious, very floating energy, and we're not and for that reason it's sometimes hard to pin down exactly what Pisces energy is. But fortunately we have a way of doing that this time around, and I'll start with this: that a lunar eclipse, anytime it happens, signals that we're coming to an end of a cycle or a phase. Now, the length of that cycle or phase for us individually and collectively can be very different for each of us. It may be a phase that started a few months ago, as I mentioned, in June, or it could be phases that around the numbers of 7, say a 7-year phase or a 9-year phase or a 4-year. There's a lot of mystery around that. So we won't say that it means necessarily that it relates to a particular timing, other than to say this energy began to show up for us in the collective about 3 months ago, and will still be around waning, of course, in 3 months' time. But that phase that's coming to an end for you, that's where your intuition needs to come to the table. So a lunar eclipse in Pisces is absolutely about what I call a phase transition, where we are moving from one experience, one energy, one vibration to another. But it's not abrupt. It happens in quite a smooth way, just like watching a sun set or a moon rise, or the tides come and go. It doesn't just happen. It happens over a period of time. And you know, for those who love time-lapse photography, for example, there's a great illustration of how you can set your camera and watch the sun set, and it may happen over a sort of an hour or 2-hour period. So we're kind of that energy of time moving, but also seeming like it's standing still as well. But the energy also of an eclipse is that of letting go and releasing emotional. Of course, the moon is to do with our emotions. So we're talking about releasing emotional baggages and blockages tied to beliefs and judgments. So this can be a powerful, mysterious, and transcendent experience if we're open to it. As I mentioned before, it's like watching the tide go out or the tide come in. And so we are naturally being asked, or to take advantage of this, the best thing is to tune into the cosmic rhythm and timing of what's taking place rather than our own sense of timing. Sometimes they can be different. And of course, Pisces is to do with water, which means metaphorically movements in the consciousness, whether that be our individual consciousness or the collective or both. It can be dreamy and somewhat discombobulating. We are likely to be immersed in waves of emotional and spiritual energies, sometimes quite subtle. Pisces in the astrological mosaic is what we call the house of dissolution and emergence. This is where things end and begin, or begin and end. And of course, in some mythological schools, the beginning and the ending are the same thing. The snail eating its take, the snake eating its tail, rather, the endless circle, the infinity, the flow of energy. That's the idea. The house of discontinuities, and that kind of means most of us have watched television or film or theatre where, especially, it's a technique that filmmakers do a lot these days, where you don't actually know sometimes where you are in the timeline. You're watching an art, a film, a story, but the timelines are mixed and mingled. That's your Piscean energy, where it's sometimes, as I mentioned, a little hard to get your handle or to get in touch with what exactly is happening, but you know that there's movement, where the past, the present, and the future can be intermingled. The key thing here, though, is to tune into our spirit and our intuition and to listen. Pisces is the masculine intelligence, the sacred masculine, whereas Ophiuchus is the divine feminine. So we're talking about tuning into the sacred masculine intelligence. And the beautiful synchronicity here, of course, at the end of this process, around about that December 22nd, the solstice, the end of the 6 months, is that also coincides with a full moon in the divine feminine sign of Ophiuchus. So we get to hear from the sacred masculine intelligence now by tuning into our spirit and our intuition. And at the end, we get to hear from almost like a time of contemplation, of summary, of looking back. We get to really tune into the divine feminine intelligence, and that's the balance of the masculine and the feminine in this whole 6-month process coming forward in December. So the key also is meditation and mindfulness. Sound and light therapies will help us get into that kind of intuitive state, that highly receptive state, to hear the message for us or the messages for us. And anything that helps us get into those transcendental states, pranic breathing, whatever it is. For some, it can simply be connecting with the horizon, looking out at the sunset, whatever. Sun staring is another modality. There's a whole lot of these. So, and we don't want to be prescriptive, but the key is, for now, to really tune in, is to open your eyes, your inner eyes and inner ears and inner spirit, to hear from the sacred masculine.
Beautiful, thank you. The next topic we want to talk about today is something that we don't get to talk about very often, because using the true constellation sizes, Scorpio is only 7 degrees, and therefore I think it's very important that when something significant happens, that we do take the time to talk about it. So today we are talking about there's a trine to Pallas Athena in Scorpio. So how does that relate to this lunar eclipse?
I think this relates beautifully. And you're right, of course, with the asteroid Pallas Athena will not spend a lot of time in Scorpio. So she's just gone into that constellation. And Pallas Athena, as we've talked about her before, as part of the divine feminine architecture, if you like, the divine feminine energies. There's a bunch of these that are coming through. Many astrologers won't talk about Pallas Athena, but we absolutely love talking about her. And of course, for you, Sana, are very connected to Pallas Athena in your third house of communication. But the energies here for Pallas Athena and Scorpio, who plays, as you mentioned, a trine, which is a beneficial relationship. So the energy flow between the moon in this case and Pallas Athena and Scorpio, the moon in Neptune, beg your pardon, the moon in Pisces, and Pallas Athena and Scorpio. So we have a water-water relationship, very, very beneficial for us. Pallas Athena is the strategist, but the energies here is that as we are tuning in, as I mentioned before, and listening intently to hear and to understand where we are prone to self-deception, delusions, and delusions, which is the shadow side of Neptune and Pisces. What will help us with that, to access the depths of awareness and to do some strategic dream work, say writing out a diary and reflecting on it, which helps to give us insight into uncovering our unconscious patterns of behavior, which will help with our self-awareness. That is very much a Pallas Athena perspective on how we would go about practically grounding some of this really high vibrational, floaty, drifty Piscean energy, which might be a little difficult, as I mentioned before, to isolate and apply to what's going on in our lives. We don't want to miss the moment. So Pallas Athena says, do something strategic, like writing down your thoughts. You may not have done it before, but try doing it for a month or two, and then you'll see some things about yourself, and you'll see things about your behavior, and you'll see things about your situation and circumstances that maybe you were not willing to see or unable to see. So externalizing that inner musings and inner reflection is a big part of using the Pallas Athena and Scorpio energy for our benefit. It's also understanding, of course, the Scorpio energy is about where we get triggered and we can lurch into sort of avoidance behaviors, anger, rebellion, or have knee-jerk reactions to people or to situations and circumstances. And often those experiences are filed away in our subconscious because we don't want to deal with them. We don't want to come back to them. So we push them away. And that can lead to self-deception, that can lead to delusions, that can lead to distortions in our view of the world and our view of ourselves. Just coming back to the idea that Pisces and this lunar eclipse is about firstly identifying where we are subject to flights of fancy, where we are operating with a blind spot, where we are functioning with self-deception, where we are functioning in a very compulsive or unconscious way. And what we're suggesting here, or what the Pallas Athena and Scorpio is, to ground that, to make sense of that, there are some techniques that you can use. But the first thing is you've got to recognize where you may have been triggered, where you may be operating in a way that is unconscious, which feels like it's working because out of sight, out of mind. But yet at this time, we're being encouraged to bring that forward so that we can acknowledge it, play with it, and release it into the Piscean ethers, if you like. Scorpio, of course, is where we can strongly defend our virtues, our morals, our sacred cows. This is where we can take a position of being absolutely non-negotiable, and therefore we, in dealing with others and dealing with situations and dealing with life, Scorpio energies can be where we retreat into judgment and self-recrimination and criticism, and we can fixate on the problem rather than or the person or the personality, or we scapegoat or look at our boss or the government or something, and we blame that rather than focusing on solutions and remediation. Well, of course, the Piscean energy, the lunar energy of this eclipse, is that in order to release, to remediate, to solve, to fix, to overcome, we must first go back to the source of the problem and try to resolve it and play with it. And this is where the Scorpio, Pallas Athena, being very strategic, very tactical, very skillfully doing that, so that we're not just sitting in the lotus position with our legs crossed, listening for guidance and intuition. We're actually doing some work to help us get to that place of realization and self-awareness.
Yes, for me, it's very much writing things down, like, and to have that discipline, really getting into that discipline of being strategic and then opening up to really hear those messages, because otherwise I'm just too busy and there's a million things to do, as we all have a million things to do. But if we really want to make the most of that beautiful connection that we have with all that is, then we need to stop that busyness, and whatever works for you to do that, do that. Next up, I'm very excited about this because this will lead into how the houses tie into the people listening to this, is the opposition of Mercury and Saturn. So Mercury is located at this lunar eclipse and Leo, and Saturn is still in Aquarius. So how is this opposition important right now?
Yeah, particularly important. And Saturn is in retrograde as well, and Mercury in Leo means that Leo energy is bringing kind of pretty full noise, almost maximum amplification to Mercury's energies as well. So this is a powerful part of this lunar eclipse that's going on in the background, which, if we are to do the inner work in order to identify and establish where we are self-deceived, where we are subject to illusions and delusions in our lives, which is that shadow of Neptune and Pisces. And the reason that we would do that is to help us evolve, to clear, to release, to be unencumbered, if you like. And we've talked about the role of Pallas Athena, and you just mentioned the strategic way of doing that. And there's lots of books and lots of self-help videos and YouTube podcasts and all sorts to help us with that inner journey. But also adding to that is this Mercury-Saturn opposition. And where Mercury is the detail, Mercury is the analysis, Mercury is that energy of data and intellect, of engaging our left brain, engaging our critical mind, bringing that rationality and balance and objectivity to the table, so that as this emerging awareness of impediments in our lives, of blockages in our lives, are coming and floating through, waving through into our reality through the Pisces energy, we can actually pinpoint it, nail it. And this is why it's going to require us to be actively mentally involved in this process. That, as I said, being caught up in simply the reverie and listening intently, even in deep mindfulness or meditation practice, isn't enough. We need to draw out of that and come into the here and now and into the mundane. And this is what that Mercury and Saturn energy is all about, and why it's so important also working with Pallas Athena. When we engage our left brain intellect, when we engage our critical mind, when we write things down, when we go through the practice and the process of self-awareness in order to identify these emotional, spiritual blockages, we can easily and more easily look for synchronicities and serendipities. We can look for, well, the key here is to be open to odd or extraordinary or unusual events. Change happens at the edge of chaos is an expression that comes to mind. It happens at the extremities of our awareness, at the very outer limits of our understanding. And this is why sometimes we miss it. So in other words, a little small event may have taken place, but it was actually a signal coming from the outer limits of our reality to actually say, hey, there's something there. So pull on that thread and have a look at it, because actually what's in behind it is something pretty magical and important for you to confront and deal with. So we are, as humans, complex adaptive systems, and we adjust through the flux in the field, which provides us with feedback loops, energetic feedback loops, and those energies can be positive or negative. So it's therefore when we have an extreme emotional reaction to something, whether that's coming internally through the way that we just feel, and this can be a good feeling or a not so good feeling. The feelings where we feel off about something, sometimes they're actually very revealing if we just lift the lid on that and say, why would I be fearful of that? Or why would I be worried about that? And sometimes it's actually because of a deeply held or buried experience, as I mentioned before with Scorpio, where we just have shut it off and we didn't want to look at it, but now is the time. The predictability that we thrive in, most humans like to have predictability, sameness, comfort, so that we can switch off our minds. You mentioned before about the busy mind, but actually now this is about bringing that mind to the table, but not in a haphazard way, but in a very ordered way, so that we can discern and unravel what's going on emotionally. Look for glitches in the matrix and pull on those threads. Be open to insights and breakthrough, but that's best accessed, if you like, through structured creativity, such as brainstorming or mind mapping. Mind mapping is very powerful, by the way. It would be really, really useful at this time, especially in the next 3 months, and looking back over the last 3 months, of looking at what some of those thin threads were, what some of those little events were that we might have dismissed. But now, as we're bringing our consciousness to it, our left brain, masculine intelligence to this, we can say, actually, that begins to make sense. Now I can start to look at that, because it might have been telling me something that I was needing to hear from the universe. This is where, of course, Mercury allows us, as the winged messenger, to traverse to the boundaries of our memory and experience. And it is there at that boundary that we will find those limitations and restrictions that are holding us back. So this is part of our evolution and progress. This is the process of unlearning and relearning. And Saturn energy here is that we will gain mastery and we will learn lessons, powerful, transformative, enduring lessons of resilience and making sense and getting that confident know-how. We go through that when we work through what we call, actually, we might put this up on the screen later when we do the editing of this, but what's called the hierarchy of competence. And at the bottom of that hierarchy of competence, this is very much a Mercury-Saturn energy in the real world, is that the very bottom layer of that hierarchy of competence is wrong intuition. The next layer of it is wrong analysis. Then the next layer of that's the uncompetence And then the competence comes from when we get the right analysis at the table, and that allows us to intuitively perceive more accurately. So sometimes our intuition can actually lead us astray, because what's underneath that is that we interpreted a situation in our lives, usually something traumatic, difficult, or uncomfortable for us. We interpreted it in the wrong way, in terms of, and by wrong and right, we simply mean that at the time it felt right, but now you look back on it with hindsight and you're like, I could have seen that differently. I could have dealt with that differently. And it's the power of that recognition and the power of that realization and the power of that hindsight that helps you to reconfigure, remaster, reframe the situation, the energy, the emotional experience in order to move forward. And this is very much the weaving of Mercury and Saturn, the grounding in this very, as I mentioned before, this very esoteric, very floaty, very drifty, sometimes hard to pin down Piscean energy.
Yes. And just to, for those who are not quite aware, the Mercury energy is stronger because the sun is in Virgo, and Virgo is also the guardian of Virgo is also Mercury. So there's some beautiful energies there. Without further ado, can you please highlight how this eclipse impacts all of us differently in the houses? But before I give the microphone to you, just want to share with our audience that in the last month, we've done 2 natal readings with people that we've known for a while. And the feedback we've received from both of them has been so incredibly special. As many people that we've done readings with, it's that feeling of coming home, of reflecting of, oh my gosh, now it makes sense why I do XYZ when A, B happens, and those kind of things. And so the gaining the knowledge of what your natal chart looks like, and especially as David will go through that Pisces house, where does it sit in your chart? You can win at life so much easier when you really understand or know how your astrological chart looks. So now I will give the microphone to you to talk about the houses and this Piscean energy.
Beautiful introduction as per usual. So we don't normally do this, but I thought when I was looking at the chart and contemplating, there was so much going on that, and I've mentioned this before, that there's a lot we could talk about and we could be here for hours, but that's not helpful, I don't think. So in this case, I've got a very strong message coming through intuitively to share a little, just brief overview of, if you know that this lunar eclipse, which is what, 3 degrees Pisces, where that actually is happening in your specific 13 sign chart, your divine design, you'll quickly or more quickly be able to ascertain and to access the key message that Source, the divine sacred masculine, has for you. And before I read, not read, but before I share my interpretation of each house and where, let's call it the context for you, because you might have this eclipse happening in your first house and your daughter or son or partner might have it in their 9th house, for example. So you will have very different experiences of the eclipse energy. And that, in fact, applies anytime there's a full moon or a new moon. It always affects us all. But because this is a lunar eclipse, and because it's so important, i.e., because it's in Pisces, it's the end of a cycle, an end of a phase, an end of a period. It's so profound individually and collectively that I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about each house, so that, as we mentioned, provided you know, and if you don't, get in touch with us and we'll provide you with a chart for a small donation. But knowing this will really accelerate your evolution and awareness, and will bring together the Mercury energy of insight and the Saturn energy of mastery and lessons and the Pallas Athena energy of strategy to move forward, especially when you're looking back over the last 3 months, because remember that this energy actually started to quietly make itself felt around the time of June 22nd, solstice. Solstice. So the Neptune energy, or the Pisces energy, and I keep mentioning Neptune and Pisces, I'm interlinking the two because the moon is conjunct to Neptune at the same time, and this is all happening in Pisces. Neptune, of course, is the guardian of Pisces. So I'll mention Neptune, I'll mention Pisces, I'm referring to the same energies, really. But the key message, just for summary, is this is where we are prone to self-deception. We are prone to illusion and delusion. And the Saturn Mercury energy is where we must master our minds, trust our intellect, and learn our lessons before we evolve, expand, and grow. Now, how are we going to do that if we don't know which house it's in, or have any idea about that? So if this eclipse happens at 3 degrees Pisces in your first house, then the area that you are most likely to be prone to self-deception, illusion, and delusion, and therefore will be most open to learning lessons and mastery so that you can evolve and expand, is in the area of your self-awareness, your self-image, your personal projection to the world, how you learn, interact with, and meet the world where it is at, and how the world meets you. That's the first house. If it's happening in the second house, what we are dealing with here in terms of self-deception, illusion, and delusions, or where the lessons to be learned, the mastery to be learned, some tough lessons, is in the area of resource management. How we deal with our raw materials, usually our money, time, how we refine our skills, how we deal with our drive to accumulate and to master the basics of survival, which are food, shelter, and clothing. We could be stuck in those ways, or be open to learning a profound lesson that will help us evolve and expand from here. If it's happening in the third house, we're talking about content and communication. Let me explain a little bit about that. Content here is childhood memories and experiences. So that draws to the surface sibling rivalries, family dynamics, role models, centers of influence that deposited knowledge into our lives, and information that helped us ultimately communicate and connect with others. So that's where the deceptions and the learnings can emerge. And that may involve some difficult relationships with brothers or sisters or teachers, or basically going back to childhood learning. So school will be a part of that as well. Fourth house experience or experiences are to do with lineage and roots, and that is energies that are transmitted through our genome, our DNA. There's an expression, the sins of the father or mother are visited on the third and fourth generations. So in other words, sometimes you get these genetic behaviors as well as physical issues and experiences that can pass through generations. This is what we're talking about here. Congenital disorders, familial traits. This is also where we are most prone in the fourth house to unconscious patterns that manifest emotionally, mentally, and physically, what I call the instinct. So we just have an instinctive reaction to something and we don't even know why. Well, if an eclipse is happening in that fourth house, it's to do with those instincts, those knee-jerk reactions, and our genetics and our genome on a physical plane, but also those mental, emotional energies that are just part of culture and family. This is where we may be getting stuck. Be open to lessons and learning. In the fifth house, we're talking about creativity, expression, and our ego identity. This is the house of where we showcase our skills, where we're playful, artistic, and physical, where we develop our confidence, where we assert our personal power, where we preen, showcase, and ruffle our proverbial feathers in search of fun, frivolity, friendship, and even a bed pal. So we may have some deceptions and delusions and illusions in those areas, or be open to learnings and lessons. The sixth house is the house of work and well-being. So this is where we knuckle down and swap hours for dollars, where we deal with and grapple with the idea of work-life balance, where we connect with our physical limitations and therefore our health, and we derive meaning from toil. The seventh house is that house of contracts and commitments, and this is where I becomes we, where we engage or enter into serious relationship, be they personal or professional, say a business partnership, for example, or a marriage. It doesn't need to be a formal marriage. It can be a serious committed relationship. But this is the domain where something is on the line, where we have significant skin in the game, where we collaborate, coordinate, and operate as a couple, and we may have some lessons and learning from there, or some delusions and illusions that we're not confronting within that context. The eighth house is the house of leverage, death, taxes, financial entanglements, and encumbrances. This is the domain of deep emotional connection to our resources, where we hoard, where we focus on wealth creation, investments, inheritances, estates and probates, wills, and infighting in the family over resources as well, particularly where somebody has passed. The ninth house is the house of the higher mind, metaphysics. This is where our knowledge accumulates from Gemini's data collection, but we package it up into this belief structure, this structure of ideas. So this is the house of ideas, the arc of education. I've mentioned before about the third house. This is where it starts and this is where it kind of ends and peaks. This is the information and knowledge that we've gathered through practical experiences, through structured education, through the school of hard knocks. This is where we can become mentally stuck, indoctrinated, limited, dogmatic, intellectually dominant, judgmental, and we bullhorn others. Lots and lots of room for growth there. Delusions, illusions, self-deceptions could be what's happening. In the 10th house, this is the house of public profile and career. This is the peak of Virgo work. So Virgo is work, this is career. And this is where we experience the rewards and recompense, just rewards or recognition. This is adulthood. This is where we are concerned about how we look to the community. This is where we try to keep up with the Joneses. This is also, therefore, where we're subject to hubris. We're also subject to those experiences of penthouse to outhouse, falls from grace, rude awakenings, karmic strikes, if you like. This could be where we've had some difficult experiences in our career, our public profile, and we've never really reconciled them or sought to deal with them. If that's for you, this is the opportunity to be released from that. The 11th house, the second to last, is the house of community collaboration, innovation, and invention. This is where we give of our 10th house experiences. Our wisdom is given back to the collective, where we contribute to the expansion of the collective consciousness, where we bring our experience, our insight, and our foresight for what can be. This is where we participate in disruptive movements as change agents, as revolutionaries, as evolutionaries, as a species, and where we deal with the frontier of human design, where we confront existential crises and challenges, where we deal with paradigm shifts around things like AI and robotics, demographics and aging, and the demand on the social purse, where there's not enough people to pay for it. That's very much an 11th house issue, where we look at things like gene editing, biotechnologies, advanced technologies, stargates and star travel, you name it. This is all happening in the 11th. So deceptions, delusions, illusions here could be somebody who is like, I know I can contribute, but I don't want to know. I don't want to be a part of it. Or alternatively, they're thinking of moving into that area and they just want a bit of a push in life to give you a bit of a push. Well, life's giving you that push now to stand up and speak up. And the 12th, finally, the 12th house of 3 degrees Pisces in this lunar eclipse is happening in the house of Pisces itself, wherever that is for you, and that's your 12th house. This is the house of dissolution and emergence. This is where our sense of the physical, so we're deeply attuned to the gateway between the physical and the spiritual. This is where we dwell with the divine, where we reconnect with our essence, where we dream and design our futures, where we access multidimensional experiences, where we connect with our guardians and guides, our soul families. This is where we remember that we are spirit having a temporary human experience. This is where we are deeply connected with cosmic rhythms, infinite wisdom, artistic expression, sound, light, and color, flow, life's flow, and we can instinctively and intuitively know that we can release all that is, and that we can discover those gaps between time, which happens in mindfulness and meditation if it's deep enough, where we are drawn to quiet, intuitive, contemplative experiences, where we have a profound relationship with life as a passing phase and as a physical transition. So the illusion, delusion, self-deception there could be that you know you need to be spending time doing that, but you're not. Alternatively, you could be spending too much time doing it, and so the lesson in mastering might be to dial that back and to get out of that very high frequency and to pull some of that down and anchor it in the reality of the here and now.
Wow, how exciting to have all that beautiful information shared with everyone. Thank you so much for simplifying those beautiful houses. And there's so much more that we could say about all those, obviously. Is there anything else you would like to share about this beautiful time that we are experiencing now with this lunar eclipse?
There certainly is, and I won't do this every time, but we do put in the cliff notes, and it's up to people to read or not read, but we do put some comments in there, and this time, like the last blog, I'm going to read it just because it's a nice way to summarize this, and because we are dealing with Pisces, the end of a cycle, the end of a phase, and it's so profound depending on which house it's happening for you. I wrote this down and I thought that I'd share it just as our closing. A lunar eclipse in Pisces takes us to the edge of chaos, where we will find our self-limiting beliefs, faulty intuition, incorrect analysis, delusions, and illusions. Here, at the boundaries of our experience, we as a complex, adaptive intelligence have stopped expanding, where we've ceased learning, where we've lost our curiosity and given up on our dreams. It is here, therefore, in Pisces, existing as pure potential, that we reconnect with the infinite wisdom of the universe, where we align with its cosmic rhythm, where we shake off deception and ride the upward spiral of creativity. This Pisces lunar eclipse energy lasts for 6 months, 3 of which have already gone. Beginning at the June solstice on the 22nd with a powerful T-square of the full moon to Neptune in Pisces, a quiet inner revolution began to take place. We may not have been aware of it, but it has been gathering pace. Now at this halfway point, the apex of alchemy, we are being tasked to connect with this energy of change, to identify it and consciously ride its momentum through to the culmination of the Ophiuchus Full Moon, December 15, and the solstice of the 22nd. Excuse me, I just need a drink of water. We must become aware of what is happening on the inner planes of our lives. In pre-manifestation, connect with it and recognize that there's no stopping this. Just like we couldn't stop the spontaneous process of learning to crawl, walk, and run, The house where this potent lunar eclipse occurs is the context for this breakthrough, the domain where great shifts will take place in your life, and where right now sacred masculine intelligence has a special, specific message for you. The more aware you are of the 6-month process of renewal, the better placed you will be to recognize Source speaking through events in your life. Pisces is the house of dissolution and emergence, where everything in this temporary human mundane experience of the physical third density dissolves, devolves, and deconstructs. Where our memories, knowledge, lessons, and learnings are ultimately released to the collective consciousness. The law of thermodynamics shows that energy never dies. It just transforms, shifts its vibrational signal, changes its frequency to oscillate differently, and in doing so, energy, that is us as essence, comes to experience more of itself in a different form. In Pisces, we are immersed in the waves of thought, sound, light, and spirit, so it behooves us to find our feet somehow, lest we be swept away. This is where the weight of the Virgo sun in opposition plays its part, bringing us back to earth. Adding to this is the opposition of Mercury to Saturn, which implores us to undertake a journey of self-discovery, looking at how we behave through the technician's lens, while Pallas, Athena, and Scorpio bring strategic insight. When we willingly dissect our behavior, we unlock impediments blocking us from experiencing something different. Here at this lunar eclipse, we give rise to the mantra, the beginning of wisdom is to know thyself, a process accomplished by unlearning, relearning, profound self-honesty, and courageous intent.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Be courageous, get in touch, get your personalized 13 sign natal chart and understand your life a little bit better. Thank you so much, David, for giving us all this beautiful knowledge today. I'm going to cherish the beautiful knowledge for myself, for my children. I think the power we give ourselves by understanding our loved ones better. I've used this so much with my two beautiful beings that I am privileged to guide in this lifetime, and understanding that he is definitely a Cancer and not a Leo, and she is definitely an Aries and not a Taurus, and knowing where everything else is has been such a blessing with your guidance as well. So thank you so much for today, and I look forward to see how the next 3 months unfolds for us.
Namaste.
Nami.